إن الحمد لله ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وهو حبيبنا، فنصلي ونسلم عليه على الدوام، ونحن مأمورون أن نصلي عليه عن طريق القرآن، فنصلي عليه وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين بجهدهم وتضحيتهم قام هذا الدين، فرضي الله عنهم أجمعين. We come back to the issue of Ramadan, and we want to make sure that we have some ideas that are clear. We mentioned before, and we're in the shade of the ayat, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام. That ayat, we have to really understand the importance of what that means. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, when we say that He legislated, it means that He commanded in the Quran that we fast the fast of Ramadan. And we started to talk about some of the purposes or the objectives, some of the reasons or the goals of why it is that we fast. And we talked about how, for instance, when Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala here, He's calling the believers and telling the believers, which is us, as well as those that came before us who were following the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that they're to fast. And in this regard, this is something that is unique. The fast is not something that is specific to the followers of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, like we said. But it was also commanded on the people that came before. We mentioned that. كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. And we mentioned that Imam Shah Wali Allah rahmatullahi alayhi, who's from the ulama of India, he became known to be one of the scholars that took back the knowledge of hadith back to India. And that was before India was divided into Bangladesh and Pakistan and Kashmir and all that. It was one people, one community with different tribes. But he says in Ta'wil al-Hadith that when we look at the nations that came before, especially the nation of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, or the community of Nuh, that they were obligated to fast with frequency because their nature was changed. They were like animalistic. So in order to break that nature that they have, which is going against the human nature, in other words, is a nature that's out of control, the fast was put on them with frequency and so on and so forth, with the goal of what? Of restoring their humanity. And we mentioned before that there's a difference between the human being and the animals and the angels. And we share in qualities that the angels have, and we share in qualities that the animals have, but the human being is distinct. That's an important point. Because when you go and you study in science, and sometimes in some areas in psychology, if those of you who have studied behavioralism or the example of Pavlov's dog, they understand, the psychologists understand those qualities that the human being shares with the animals. That's what they use in advertising. They use all of that They use it in video games. They use it in movies to train the mind and to train your instincts. That's why we have advertisements like before. Obey your thirst. Obey your thirst. You get the idea? Obey your desire. If you have thirst, you obey your desire. Not that you're in control of your desire, but you obey your desire, because in that case, that's part of an advertisement that's going to cause a business to grow. So the idea is to make sure that what you're obeying your desire, because as long as you're obeying your desire, then you're feeding that market. Right? And that's the same thing when it comes to the issue of how much time we spend on our cell phones and so on and so forth. The more that we're obeying the desire that we have to be entertained by that, and the more that we're addicted to that, that grows somebody's business, but it has a massive impact on us. That's not the life that Islam wants us to live. Islam doesn't want us to live the life where we're addicted to things, whatever it may be. Addiction is not only to drugs, people. We have that mindset that we think addiction is to drugs. We live in a country where obesity is something which is widespread, and it's not just the issue that the food is genetically altered. It's also the issue that we become greedy people. And we mentioned before about the issue of israf, the issue of wastage. And we mentioned how, unfortunately, in the time of Ramadan, what begins to happen is that we become a people that waste. And we do it and we celebrate with the Bismillah, mashallah, and everything in front of it, with the recital of the Quran, you know, and everything that comes along with that. And we find ourselves wasting food. And that's a shame on us. Some of us come from countries in which people are struggling, crying to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala when it comes to the issue of looking for work and food and everything like that, and we sit here and we waste. So the issue of being in control of ourselves, we can't keep emphasizing that point, because that's where freedom is at. Freedom is not only political freedom. Freedom is when we're also free of our desires controlling us. So everyone, يعني كل واحد لازم أن يراجع نفسه لكي يضبط يعني بالتوكيد واليقين أنه هو حر غير مرتبط بالشهوات، يعني ليس عبد للشهوات. يعني كل واحد لازم يضبط هذا. لو جعل الهواء إله هذه مشكلة ومصيبة كبرى. If we make our desire our God, you know, we read and we know that in the time period in the Kaaba was full of all kind of idols. But in this time period, we have the idol of desire. And when it comes to the issue of addiction, it can get to the level of shirk. We see that. All you have to do is go to some of these areas in this city. You go to Philadelphia, and you see people that are addicted to drugs, beautiful human beings from every background. Nobody's exempt, mashallah, as the United Nations, when it comes to the issue of being addicted to drugs in that regard. And their whole life, the day, almost 24 hours a day, some of them, because they stay awake, they're just pursuing, how can I get high? How can I get high? How can I get high? And across the water over there, in Manhattan, is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. How can I follow the money? How can I follow the money? And that's what life becomes. And then you have some youth, they have these whole things where they have these video game parties. They bring their food, they bring everything. They lock themselves in the room. It's trying to go like at hours with the games on it. That's a situation now where the human being is not the human being of dignity and standing, but is the human being which is the human being that is following the desire to such an extent that the human being is no longer free. So the month of Ramadan, when it comes to free us from ourselves. That's why it's important that we take the month of Ramadan seriously. Because the month of Ramadan overall is based on the issue of tarbiyah. And one of the definitions that we learned, that word tarbiyah. The word tarbiyah is tied into when we say like Rabbul Alameen. When we say Allah is Rabb, it means Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala didn't just create us and leave us. That's the belief of Benjamin Franklin. That the world was created and then Allah left it, and then the world of Allah is one place and the world of human beings is another place, and human beings do whatever they want to do on the earth. That's not the belief of the Muslim. The belief of the Muslim is that Allah created the world, Allah guides us, Allah gives us our rizq, and part of that guidance is not just guiding us like, for instance, biologically, right? We have stages of growth, or from the angle of the control that Allah has in the world and the rizq in the universe. And no, it's also sending the prophets. When the prophets come, the prophets are coming because our thinking by itself is not enough to guide us. But our thinking is what makes us unique as human beings. Our thinking and our ability to take decisions. The animals can't do that. So when we are tied to our desire and we become slaves to it, then we lost our identity as human beings. So the issue of tarbiyah, Imam al-Baydawi rahmatullahi alayh, who's one of the great scholars of Islam, he's one of those who made tafsir, and tafsir is that he clarifies some of the meanings of the Quran. And he says, يعني التربية هي تبليغ شيء إلى كماله شيء فشيء. That's a beautiful definition of tarbiyah. That's what I wanted to share with you. Because it's not just the issue of education, it's the issue of guiding the process. There's a goal. So you go step by step to the point of completion or perfection. So Allah wants us to come to the most perfect state of our humanity. We can never be perfect like Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. الكمال حقيقة لله لكن المطلوب من الإنسان أن يطلب الكمال. That is what the human being should be aiming for. When we talk about the issue of ihsan, we have this idea now when we talk about converts. We say converts this, converts that. But that's not how they talked about people coming into Islam in the early generation of the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would say of a person when they came into Islam, and that's every one of us, because we have to come into Islam with our consciousness. In other words, you can't just say that I'm Muslim and that's it. You have to consciously want to be Muslim. You have to consciously every day make the decision to want to be Muslim. But they used to say, Hasana Islamah. So the issue of ihsan is to go from one stage to another stage to better. You know, we have the idea of Husn al-Islam al-Mar tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. In other words, we have the idea that every day we should be progressing to the better. But that progression, in this case in Ramadan, is the progression that we make when we begin to have control of ourselves over our desire. When we begin to have another understanding of how it is that we use time. To change a habit, we need about 30 days or so. The month of Ramadan is about 30 days. It's that time period in which we're looking at how it is that we can perfect ourselves. It's not just the issue of, mashallah, it's the time of, we come together and there's the best food and there's this and that. It's the time period where the Muslim community stops. It's not just the issue of stopping the food and drink. We stop our lives to look at ourselves and see what it is that we need to change. And Islam, in that sense, gives us the promise that we can change. But it takes a process. And that's with any situation that we're in. It's a process. And so we always have to be thinking about how is it that we can go to another stage of our growth and our development. And that's why the concept of tarbiyah is very important. And we talked about the issue of the discipline of the self, but there's also tarbiyat al-aql. And we say that, the reality of the Quran is that. That's what we want to end with today in this khutbah. When we talk about Laylatul Qadr in Ramadan, and we talk about the issue of Qadr, some say destiny, this, that. I don't want to get into those types of debates right now. But we should know that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala created everything with purpose and understanding. That's our difference between us and the non-Muslims. Non-Muslims, they say the universe exists without any purpose. That's it. That's how they function in the world. Not all of them, of course, like the Christians and others. But that's the problem in science. When we come to science, when we see biology and the biological development in the volcano, we look at the dissection of a bird or whatever it be, we believe that Allah is behind it. And we believe that, yes, Allah created our intellect to be able to understand that. There's no contradiction between us understanding and growing in our understanding in the Quran. That's the difference that we have between ourselves and the Christians and the others. Science never can come to a point where it's going to undermine the Quran itself. And those who have tried that approach, right now, look at where they're at. They're lost to themselves with their identity. They don't understand the meaning of life, the purpose of life. Science can never give you the purpose of life, Habib. It can explain to you one point or this or that, but when it comes to life itself, the meaning of life, you're going to have to come back to the reality of the Quran. So one of the most powerful things about Laylatul Qadr is that the Quran was revealed in it, and from that time on, it changed the world. We have to ask, is it changing us? Those people in that society, they were people that had all kinds of problems, and the Quran came in that society and changed it. So when we talk about the Quran and Ramadan, is the issue of us having some sort of connection with it beyond just the beautiful recitation. That's important. It's important to move the heart. It's important to move the feeling. And art in Islam is important. Art in the wrong hands, it changes people's attitudes. It takes people to corruption. Art in the right hands elevates the human being. That's why we don't say that fun is not important, games are not important, art is not important. That's important. But we need Muslims to go into art, to do the right type of art, which elevates the human being, not takes the human being to an animal level. That's the problem. Some of the TikTok reels and all that, Instagram reels, is amazing artwork, what they do, ideas in it. But at the end of the day, when I leave, I'm like, what? How did I benefit as being a human being? How did it elevate me to be a human being? That's the problem with it. But if the Muslims were doing TikTok reels and Instagram reels, we're showing the best of humanity, then we're doing da'wah, and we're preserving ourselves and our youth and others. For you young people that do those reels. But the Quran itself, when we talk about the issue of ad-din al-nasiha, what is it that we should know? Know the history of the Quran, recitation of the Quran, should be familiar with inside the Quran. The Quran is divided into the Meccan period and the Medinan period. We should have an understanding of what is the general idea of each surah. It's not just the issue of memorization and beautiful memorization or unbeautiful memorization, but it's the issue of understanding and implementing it. That is what it means to be sincere to the Quran. We all have to take that account. So in Ramadan, I advise especially the young people, you have the clear Quran translation. In every chapter, every surah, you're going to have an explanation of what is the general meaning of every chapter. Just read that by itself in Ramadan. You don't even have to read the whole of the Quran. Just read that to understand what's going on and focus on one surah, whether it's Baqarah or something else. But the most beneficial thing that we can be focusing on when it comes to the month of Ramadan is that which was revealed in Mecca, because that's the majority of the Quran. We can say that some of the scholars, they say based on the hadith, the Quran is divided into three parts. Yani Thuluth Tawheed, Thuluth al-Qasas, وأصول في الأحكام. 3 parts. One is Tawheed, which is talking about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. The other one is talking about stories to remind us and encourage us about what happens when the believers, they stay strong, how they can overcome in life. And Allah never abandons them. And then the other issue is the halal and haram rules. But the Meccan Quran is the majority of the Quran, and that teaches us about ourselves, who we are as human beings, which is the most important lesson we can take today. Because if we're confused on who it is that the human being is, then we'll be confused about who Allah is. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم في العالمين انك حميد مجيد. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to give us guidance. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to allow us to reach Ramadan and fast the whole of Ramadan. And we beg Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala for forgiveness. We beg Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala for acceptance. And we ask Allah to change our bad deeds into good deeds. And we ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to protect our youth and elevate them. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to protect our families. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to protect our wealth and to secure us and stabilize us. And we ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to put an end to this war so that it doesn't destroy the economy. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala for the innocents. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala for the Muslims in every country, in every place on the face of the earth, and the oppressed, no matter who they are. And we ask for those who are sick, that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala heal them and aid them and give them relief, and to their families. And we ask that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, you accept those that have died, that you forgive them, that you change their bad deeds into good deeds, and that you give them the highest levels of Jannah, and that you inspire their children and in us to make dua for them. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, we beg you to die in the state of Salam.